Hello, and welcome back to the msuwma podcast. My name is Jacob Swartz, and I'm your host today as we talk to our guest, Mr. Matthew Curfman. Matt is the CEO and co-owner of Richmond Brothers Incorporated, host of Matt's Minutes, and published author of Fear Less Retirement. Matt shares with us what got him intrigued in wealth management and his journey into the field. He also shares important information that he's used within wealth management and beyond. We hope you enjoy. All right. Hello, Mr. Curfman.
Hi, Jacob. How are you?
I'm doing good. So today we have with us Matt Curfman. I'll kind of let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure, thank you. First, happy 2025, start of a new
Thank you.
year. You
Yeah.
mentioned that you're starting your classes and starting up school next year or next week, I guess.
Yeah.
Time of year where everyone's looking at life and reflecting on whether it's New Year's resolutions or goals. It's kind of an exciting time of year to talk about this.
Yeah.
You sent me some questions in advance, and it kind of got me thinking back. I am 44, almost 45, and I have been in this field since 1998 when I was a senior in high school
Okay.
in Jackson, Michigan, and that's kind of how I originally got started. But Matt Curfman is my name. I'm a licensed, registered. Our firm is a registered investment advisory firm, and the name of our firm is Richmond Brothers. It was originally
Mhm.
founded by John and Dave Richmond, officially in August of 1994. And so I joined them back in 1998, which was the spring of this time of my senior year.
Mm.
Kind of when I dabbled and started dipping my toes in and doing some of that. So I've actually been with them and in this field and with that firm for several decades now, which seems weird to say out loud.
Yeah. So kind of explain to me, I guess, from the start, how'd you get into this career? What brought you to Richmond and all that?
Great question. So I have a little bit of an interesting story. So when I was in high school, for anyone listening locally, I'm in Jackson, Michigan, and I went to Vandercook Lake Public School. And I had a really special teacher who was very interested in helping teach kids about balancing a checkbook back then and
Mm.
learning about when you have a job, you have to withhold taxes, and teaching us about, hey, you'll have a retirement plan, you can start to save into it. So she had really planted the seed, and it was outside of the framework of the educational system at the time. There was really no class. She created the whole thing. It wasn't something she was mandated to do.
Yeah.
And it was very practical. So it's kind of nice to learn something practical in school that you would actually use in your life. And I got to know her in my sophomore and junior year.
Mhm.
And she ultimately created an internship program for high school students where if you had, I don't remember the GPA requirement, your grades had to be at a certain level.
Yeah.
If I remember, Jacob, you had to be sponsored by, I think it was three teachers. And what that meant is three teachers had to vouch for your character, your credibility, and they were going to send you out into the community rather than taking classes your senior
Wow.
year. And you could go shadow, like literally spend your whole high school day shadowing businesses that would be part of this program. So
Mhm.
it was pretty unique at the time and unheard of across all the schools, at least in the Jackson, Michigan area. So I was a small handful of students. I was lucky I had good GPA. I was always wanting to have good grades and push myself to excel. That was one thing I thought I could control in my life.
Yeah.
And so she asked me if I wanted to do it. And at the time, I took all my aptitude tests, where they try to guide kids and say this is where your area of interest might lie.
Mhm.
And they kind of told me, Matt, you're really good with math and science. And my father is an engineer, and so they said, oh, you should be an engineer. And so I said, oh, okay. I didn't know any different. So I got
Yeah.
in this program, and I spent the first half of my senior year shadowing off of school grounds, all types, probably five, six, seven different types of engineers.
Wow.
And while that was interesting, I quickly learned I was bored out of my mind. and I was not excited about that field at all. There wasn't, at least in the jobs that I shadowed, there wasn't a lot of human interaction.
Mm.
It's kind of much more behind the scenes. And I quickly learned that I needed and I desired a little more human interaction. I still really like math. And so after shadowing at least 7 different people and in different aspects of engineering, I literally dropped out of the program. I'm like, this is not where I thought that's what I was going to college for at the time.
Yeah.
And I had already been accepted to Eastern Michigan University back then. So I was already going off to school. But of course, you haven't declared your major yet. And so what did I do? I became an intern for this one teacher who
Mm.
created the balance your checkbook, learn about saving and investing in the stock market game. And I was with her all day long. And one day she had John Richmond, one of the founders of the firm, come into the high school class and teach us about compound returns, which was
Yeah.
a completely new concept. Never ever heard of it, never understood it. And this was just half an hour presentation by an adult showing me that I could have $1 million someday.
Mm.
If I start young, it's a lot easier. And so he kind of just talked through that concept, and in my mind, just a light bulb went off. And I'm like, well, that's really interesting. Why don't I know this? Why haven't I learned about this before? And
Yeah.
the reality is, it wasn't taught. And so he left, John left, and then I stayed after and talked to my teacher, and I said, I want to intern there. And so she said, okay. So the next day we called up John Richmond and his brother Dave,
Mm.
and they took my call and just said, hey, I was part of the class. I was really interested in the topics. We want to set up some sort of internship. And they were kind of like, they didn't really have a response to me because at the time it was just the two brothers and they had
Mm.
one part-time employee. They had never had an intern. And quite honestly, Dave at the time was in his young 20s. He had also attended Michigan State University, and he was
All right.
coaching and doing all kinds of things, and had
Yeah.
started the business. So I quickly realized that they weren't sure what it was all about, and I said, "Oh, you don't have to pay me. It's a high school internship." And they said, "Oh, okay." And so we kind of created this whole program. They said yes.
Mm.
And so the rest of my senior year, I spent all of my days there until I graduated. And then when it got to the summer, they hired me away from my summer job for 25 or 50 cents more an hour to do data entry, to start filing. We had paper statements for everything back then for clients.
Yeah.
And so that's really the path of how I actually got onto this field. Um, and then I ended up just picking finance as a focus for my degree.
Mm.
But unlike what I understand about the program you're in at Michigan State, back then in the 90s, 98, 99, finance was just a very broad brushstroke, and it was
Yeah.
much more banking and very
Mm.
little to do with what my career ended up evolving into. But it's still important, I think, a lot of people, regardless of your major, that you put in the effort if you're going to go to
Mm.
college to get the degree, to do the education, to do the learning. And
Oh
your
yeah.
path can go anywhere from there.
Yeah. So then, kind of throughout college, did you stick with Richmond, and then after that, you kind of got hired on out of college and stayed with them full time?
Yeah, so it was kind of back and forth. So being from Jackson, and that's where their firm was at the time, it
Mm.
was a small office, like 700 square feet on Spring Arbor Road. I stayed there over the summer, and then I went straight to Eastern Michigan in the fall of
Okay.
'98 and lived there. And I had scholarships, so I had to stay on campus in dorms for the first 2 years.
Yeah.
And so what we ended up working out is I was able to, whenever I came back home, like if it was a weekend or holidays,
Mm.
I had just like kind of an open invitation to work there.
Okay.
So I kept the relationship, and after that first fall and winter, we decided that this was the path that I wanted to go down, but I still needed a degree as a backup.
Mm.
So then I started getting interested in what are the licenses and the professional certifications and designations that I would need if this was going to be my career. And so they helped guide me a little bit on that. And ultimately, I spent most of my summers getting licensed, getting back then my Series 7.
Mm.
my Series 65, studying for my CFP, Certified Financial Planner designation.
Yeah.
All the things that were outside of getting this 4-year degree, but would be very necessary to be in that field. And so I actually, while I was at Eastern, I also worked full time at the Ypsilanti Marriott at Eagle Crest, which is a really big golf right off the highway
Yeah.
golf place. And they do lots of big banquets. And so I ran their banquet department full
Okay.
time while I was in college, and then would come home and work oddball hours, weekends, evenings for Richmond Brothers just to kind of keep my feet in the game, so to speak.
Yeah. And then after you graduated college, you came back to Richmond, and throughout that, what were kind of your steps? Because now you're one of the owners for them.
Yeah, so thinking back all those years ago, I graduated in the spring of 2002 with bachelor in finance, and I was most of my licenses, and I was finishing up my CFP work at the time. And quite honestly, I had a panic attack. I thought, well, none of my friends in college had really any clue where they were going to work or what their like path was going to be.
Yeah.
And so I kind of my mind got the better of me, and I kind of freaked out a bit about my like life is kind of laid out for me. And most people would
Mm.
love for that to happen and kind of have a little clarity and certainty. But I kind of I don't know, it just it scared me. So anyways, that summer after I graduated, a good friend of mine said, "Hey, we should take a really big trip." And so to just reset, don't worry about, your path. And so I took the summer and I spent a month in Australia,
Okay.
which was fantastic and quite an opportunity. I'd never even had passport before that. So
Okay.
that was a big trip. And then I came back from that and I felt calm about my path and where I was going. And yeah, that fall right after Labor Day.
Mm.
Um, so I took the summer and just didn't work there. And then I started the career effectively in the summer or the fall right after Labor Day of 2002, I guess I would say. And so here we are in 2024, but I kind of had 4 years of experience
Yeah.
into that period. Um, so that's how I jumped in from college into this. And quite honestly, back in those early days, I remember you'd get paper statements, and we
Mm.
did a lot of just traditional mutual funds then. And so every quarter, all that we'd get this big box, and it's all the client statements, and we'd have to file them in all their actual physical files.
Mm.
And I was just so intrigued looking through these statements and seeing dollar amounts that were like $100,000, 200,000, 300,000. I'm
Mm.
like, oh my gosh, I've never, as a kid, I'm like, geez, that's a lot of money. And what do these people do to
Yeah.
get here, and how did they save this? And so that kind of piqued my curiosity even further.
Mm.
Um, and so that's kind of the early days of how I got started. And then it's just, you have to dive in and do it. You can't, there's no substitute for real life work. I mean, you
Yeah.
can't learn in college what sitting in front of a client who's trusting you with their life savings. It's quite powerful, and it's
Mm.
quite a burden as well, because they're trusting you and you want to make sure you do the best you can for them.
Yeah. So that kind of leads into another question. Coming into this field when you were younger, what did you do to get your clients to trust you more with their money?
That's a very good question. And I learned quickly that I had to be very creative. So at the time, I'm in my young 20s, fully licensed. I'm
Mm.
teaching educational seminars on topics, which that part, public speaking was very stressful as a
Okay.
younger person. And I think it's actually the number one fear people have in life is being in front of an audience, more than
Yeah.
death, actually.
Yeah.
So, anyways, we taught educational seminars, and I would go teach them. And people who were older than my parents, because my parents were in their 40s,
Mm.
early 50s at the time. They weren't retired. So
Mm.
people were in their 50s and 60s and like either already retired or ready to retire. And they're like 22, 23-year-old kid. I'm teaching these seminars. And eventually
Yeah.
that question kept coming up. So I had to be really creative. And what I ultimately helped them see is I just said, well, I am young. I have a lot of experience, believe it or not, already. I'm with a firm. I'm not on my own. And I asked them a question. I said, would you want to hire someone your age? And they would say, what do you mean? I said, well, would you want to hire someone your age? You know, that you're going to retire, they're going to retire, and you're going to have to go through this whole thing again. Or would you rather hire someone that can be with you for the next 10, 20, 30 years of your retirement?
Yeah.
And so that was how I ended up approaching that. And
Mm.
so most times it worked. I mean, I certainly got turned down
Mm.
from people who just didn't believe I had enough experience or time. But that was how I approached that topic to
Yeah.
be creative. But it was true and it was authentic. I really believed that I would be there and I could be there for the next 20 or 30 years of their retirement.
Wow. Yeah, it's a really good way to kind of go about that. I mean, I've never heard of somebody saying that before. So it's a great
Yeah,
idea.
yeah, don't let age be. There's certainly something for time and experience, but if you kind of know your path or you feel
Mm.
confident enough in yourself and even the vision you have and realize life will throw curveballs and things will change. But
Yeah.
just I think the confidence in yourself, if you have that, it shows through naturally. And so I
Mm.
think people are attracted to that, I believe.
Yeah, for sure. So what has Richmond kind of offered or provided you that's kind of kept you with them and attracted you from the start?
So beyond just the learning and the education, way beyond what high school and college could teach me,
Mhm.
I think having the real world experience and then for me, understanding and finding my passion was in connecting with people.
Yeah.
And it's evolved over 20, 26 years, but ultimately helping people just cut through the noise. There's so much noise. There's more noise out there than ever. There's information overload.
Hmm.
There's TikTok recommendations from people who are not registered. And I'm not saying they're giving poor advice, but there is incorrect information out there in quite a lot of places.
Yeah.
And so I quickly learned, even back then, um, this kind of ties a bigger part to your question. I remember being in college and I remember when online brokers came out, like
Mm.
Scott Trade, E Trade, Ameritrade.
Yeah.
And it was kind of the advent of the internet in the 90s. And so I thought, oh my God, did I pick the wrong career? Like, is this all going to go to technology and there's going to be
Hmm.
no need for human interaction in the space anymore? That was one of my fears.
Yeah.
But in my early years, in my 20s, I quickly learned that people want to do business with people. They want me to use technology to help make the experience better or better recommendations, better
Hmm.
informed. But most people want to do business with people. And so in Richmond Brothers, I had the opportunity to just sit with and be across the table from individuals and talk to them about their goals and their dreams with money. And um,
Yeah.
most people wanted to have set enough aside that they could comfortably retire someday,
Hmm.
not have to set their alarm clock, not have to go into work, just actually buy their time back is essentially what you're doing in retirement.
Yeah.
And so it was really neat to just be able to have the opportunity to sit down and talk to people rather than as on the engineering side, my experience was just more behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Um, and so that kept me really, really interested and intrigued. And I think just David Richmond was much more of my mentor just because he was on that side of the business.
Yeah.
Keep in mind at the time he was 25 and I was 18. So he wasn't
Mm.
that much older, but just seeing his vision and his understanding, and he kind of grew up in the insurance space. His father was a very large insurance producer, life insurance.
Yeah.
He had some idea of that, so I was able to learn so much from him, and how you can help people. And as a young
Hmm.
kid, you certainly want to go after a career where you have earnings potential.
Yeah.
And I was someone that was always willing to work to receive more, to get more, to achieve more. So
Hmm.
so the ambition was never and drive was never a problem for me.
Yeah.
Um, but we just kind of kept finding new ways to help and serve people. And all these years later, we just passed our 30th anniversary in 2024 as a company.
Wow.
And for a small business, that's pretty incredible. Most fail within the first 5 years, like a very,
Yeah.
very high percentage.
Yeah.
So it was pretty exciting to be in the early days of that,
Hmm.
but then be really a part of that growth just by connecting with other human beings, serving them. And of course I'm learning along the way. And
Yeah.
I found that you have to have the finance background, you have to be reasonable at math, but computers, calculators, software programs can help with all that.
Hmm.
But human psychology, you could have a degree in psychology and go into this field, and you would do better than someone with a degree in finance.
Yeah.
Is my view. I've learned is just human interaction with money is fascinating, and how we
Mm.
behave around money and the choices we make. So that's really kept me quite intrigued for a long time, and to this day, at 44, it still does.
Yeah. So what are kind of the future goals for both yourself and then also Richmond Brothers as well?
That is a great question. So I will take a step back in time and lead up to here, and then I'll kind of say from here forward how those goals evolve. So when I was in my 20s and my teens, you know, I didn't really have a grasp of what I wanted, other than I could see that people wanted to retire and people wanted
Mm.
to have enough money to buy their time back.
Mm.
And so from that lens, I thought, well, this is a field where I could potentially have above average earnings. And if I'm good at saving and kind of just the habit of setting money aside, and I follow what John Richmond showed me in that path, I
Yeah.
should be able to achieve some level of success at a reasonably young age. And then I should be able to retire and buy my time back. And I
Yeah.
literally thought back then, I really just want to do well. I want to help people, and I want to retire early. So that's where it started.
Hmm.
Now I'm 44, I shared with you, still in the same field, still helping people as much as I can. And what I've realized is I do want to buy my time back, but I don't want to retire.
Okay.
I When you can find yourself in a position where you can really be passionate about what you do, you can help other human beings. I think in any
Mm.
call, any field, doesn't matter if it's finance, if you can help other human beings, that's a pretty high calling. Everyone needs help in lots of areas in their life, myself included.
Yeah.
And so I like to go out and in other areas of my life, whether it's accounting or legal and estate planning or anything else, like I need humans to help me.
Yeah.
And so the point of me saying that is I really still enjoy being able to cut through all of the noise. And like I said, there's more than ever. And now I've evolved into I want to be in a position where when I'm 70 and 75 and 80,
Hmm.
if I can still contribute to a business and I can still add value, I might not want to be working 80 hours a week, but I
Yeah.
still want to actually retire. I want to keep evolving to be able to help people. And in this case, more growing a business because people are going to come along that want to learn and grow, such as yourself, and
Yeah.
have interest in this field. And there's a never ending supply of people to help. It
Yeah.
just depends on the market you're in. So my goals have evolved where I want to create better systems and structures where we can
Mm.
support more and more people, more and more clients, more and more families. And so, at Richmond Brothers, I just unveiled this week kind of our 5-year plan to the whole team internally.
Yeah.
And, one of those goals over the next 5 years is to help 500 families.
Okay.
And to give you some context, since the inception of our business, we have
Mm.
helped 1,187 families.
Wow.
That's 30 years, but there's a
Yeah.
lot of early years growth, learning. And now we're trying to say, look, as we get better at what we do, can we help more and more families? And I also don't want my existing client families to feel that
Mm.
growth.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure we keep a very customized, very special, very human to human interaction.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where the future is, at least from my standpoint. And funny enough, we're now in the age of AI,
Yeah.
and it'll be very different. It's not going to be unlike when the internet was coming out. AI is going to change a lot of things, even in this field, but
Hmm.
it's not going to ever take away the need for human to human interaction, in my view.
Yeah.
So, and there are people, there are individuals that will do everything on their own. They're self-investors. They do everything, and that's okay. There's always been that subsect of
Yeah.
people. Most people are so busy with life and kids and family and trying to grow their own careers and their own goals, they realize they have to outsource different things.
Mhm.
And finance and money is something that's really important to make sure you have a team, you have someone that you can work with, that you partner with, that you trust, because it really is a team effort. We're not directing you must do this. Our
Yeah.
goal, our job is to help present options to help you. If you were a client, say, look, here's my goal, Matt. Okay, here's some options we think could help you move down that path. What resonates with you?
Yeah.
So that's where my goal personally and professionally is. I really don't have a retirement date. Now
Yeah.
I'm still doing my own plans and I want to achieve certain financial milestones personally along the way. Um, but I actually don't have a goal to retire.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah, long answer, but it's evolved. And I'm
Yeah.
sure it will change
Great
in the
one.
next 10 years.
Yeah, for sure. So if you could tell your younger financial self some advice, what would you kind of tell yourself?
Huh, that's a really good question. So my younger self, financial advice. For myself and for everyone, when I talk to high school friends, college friends, I'll tell you that the field of work that you go into
Hmm.
doesn't matter. What I think is the most important thing to achieve financial success
Hmm.
is to create the habit of saving,
Okay.
bar none. Start young, put the money aside, and just save. Create the habit. It doesn't matter how little or how much money you make.
Yeah.
Start putting money aside because ideally, if you're successful and ambitious over time, your career will evolve. You should have the opportunity to make more money. And you don't want to set your lifestyle up in a way
Mm.
that you spend everything you make. And this is broad brushstroke advice. So I was very fortunate to pick that habit up at a young age.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's the best advice I could give anyone. Start
Okay.
setting money aside. I don't care if it's $10 a week, if you're getting paid weekly and you're in high school. I started a Roth IRA in the 90s when I was in high school. I
Yeah.
had I had earned income. I'm like, I'm gonna start saving. I'm gonna start putting money aside. Oh, this is tax free when I retire.
Hmm.
Pretty cool. So just start setting aside. Don't be overwhelmed by all of should I use a 401k? Do I have to use an employer plan? Do I use a Roth IRA? Do I open up a
Yeah.
brokerage account? Just know that you should start putting money aside. And whether it's for retirement or to put down payment on a house, like just find a way to build the habit of saving. And what you'll
Okay.
find is as your income escalates, if you're lucky and you're ambitious and you go down that road, as your income goes up,
Hmm.
your savings will go up because you have that habit already.
Yeah.
People come to me in their 60s and 70s and they're almost embarrassed um, to unveil and kind of open up all of their financials because this is their life. And
Yeah.
if they have a credit card debt or they still have a mortgage or they're still paying on a car, um, but the beauty of that is the more transparent people can be, we
Hmm.
can help them. I had a couple that was super embarrassed to come to us and they said, Matt, we have more credit card debt than and we don't like it, we don't feel good, we don't know what to do about it, but they also wanted to retire.
Yeah.
So to their credit, they came in and we laid all the cards on the table. They shared everything financially. And
Hmm.
luckily, they had also, although they had credit card debt, they had started the habit of saving young. And so we
Yeah.
went through the whole retirement plan and we crafted a strategy where I said, okay, you can retire next year. We can pay off all of your credit card debt,
Hmm.
relieve you of that stress and that burden, and you're still going to make the same amount of money. You don't have to go to work anymore.
Yeah.
They just couldn't wrap their mind around that. They were so focused on feeling guilty about decisions with credit card debt. Well, one of the things in this example they shared with me is one, it was a husband and wife, and one spouse had been very sick.
Mm.
And so they had spent a lot of money on medical bills and things above their insurance deductibles and copays. And it
Yeah.
was, you know, it was not a small figure. It was $75,000 of multiple credit card debt. But then when we got into the
Yeah.
reason, so they felt guilty, but they had to do it.
Yeah.
And then luckily, health turned around. So, but it's pretty powerful to have that discussion and help people. It's kind of like the light bulb going on for me when I was younger. And
Mhm.
that's the power of what this field or what you can do in this career.
Yeah. No, that's really awesome, the impact that you can have on people throughout this. So kind of this last question is kind of one that we like to end each interview with and kind of get it all wrapped up. What's one piece of advice that you would give students on getting started in their careers?
For students on starting their careers, I think maybe this is a two-part. I think one part I would just echo what I just said. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter where you're starting. It doesn't matter what field you're going into. College is expensive if you're coming out of college, if you've gone into the trades. Don't be so concerned about what it is that you're
Hmm.
doing or having to determine your life path at the age of 20 or 21 or 22 or 23.
Yeah.
And so I would just say start moving. Figure out what you have some interest and some curiosity and some passion about, and just move in that direction. Everything doesn't
Hmm.
have to be perfect. The stars don't have to align.
Mm.
So just move in that direction and be open and be curious. So there's all kinds of opportunities that present themselves everywhere. And
Mm.
I'll give you a real simple analogy. The best one I can think of is in our brain we have the reticular activating system, and so it's kind of like if your friend gets a brand new car, or your friend's parent gets a brand new car, and you're like, oh my god, that is such a sweet car. I've never seen one of these before. It doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
Once you see it and your brain is aware of it, what happens then in the next like couple of months? You see those cars everywhere. You never
Yeah.
saw them before. You never acknowledged them. They were always there.
Hmm.
And so your brain is open to that. So once you move in the direction of your passion and your curiosity, just take baby steps and move in that direction. Be open and be curious and just watch for things to show up
Yeah.
and start saving. Put your
Yeah.
money aside, no matter what field you're in. You can be a teacher, you can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, you can literally work at McDonald's and you can have $1 million.
Yeah.
That would be my
No.
advice. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. I love it. But
Absolutely.
well, Matt, I believe that's all I got for you. Um, and yeah, thanks for coming on the podcast. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and happy 2025. And
Yeah,
thank
same to
you for
you.
the questions. And hopefully these topics and thoughts are helpful. And
Oh yeah.
good luck as you start your semester up.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jacob.
If you enjoyed the discussion, please like and share the podcast on Apple and Spotify. The Spartan Journal podcast is part of Michigan State University's Wealth Management Association, a student organization whose goal is to inspire the next generation of financial advisors. The Spartan Journal news team releases a newsletter every Monday morning comprised of financial literacy and the week's market updates. Feel free to follow us on social media at msuwma and check out our website at msuwma.com. Anything heard on either the MSU-WMA or Spartan Journal podcasts is for educational purposes only and should not be considered as investment advice.